That smell of ash and cheap disinfectant never truly left my nostrils, not even to this very day. The walls of this asylum are pristine white, but all I can see are the gray stains of a rotten past. They say that memory fades away with time, but mine is an open wound that slowly festers and rots. If you believe that time is capable of healing all the deepest wounds, you should wait a bit longer. There are sins that can never be absolved, and there are secrets that cling to the soul like a parasite. I carried mine with me for 50 long years, feeling the sheer weight of it in every single step I took. A burden that began on a cold train platform, under a sky the color of soot and pure indifference. There, in the middle of chaos and the purest inhumanity, I committed my greatest act of betrayal and love. An act that condemned me to this very bed, to this endless, agonizing wait for the end of all my days. But the truth will always find a way to crawl out from the darkness. Doesn't it seem that way to you? My job was quite simple: to catalog the human cargo arriving in the stinking cattle cars. Names, numbers, and destinations. I was the bureaucratic cog in the great machine of death, a lesser evil. The metallic sound of the wheels on the rails was the constant soundtrack to my very worst nightmares. I never looked them in the eyes. It was a personal rule for survival, a way to keep my sanity intact. Eyes that pleaded, eyes that cursed, eyes that were already dead long before they reached the very end. My fingers, stained with dark ink, trembled as I registered each soul that passed through my hands. Every single signature was another nail in the coffin of my own conscience, a step down into hell. I convinced myself I was just a clerk, a completely passive observer of all that wretched insanity. But in the silence of the night, the echo of muffled screams invaded my room and stole all the air. And I knew, deep down, that neutrality was nothing more than a lie we tell ourselves to keep going. On that day, the fog was so thick it seemed as if the sky itself was slowly suffocating to death. The train stopped with an agonizing screech, a lament of metal against metal, a sound of pure pain. The doors slid open, and the foul stench of fear and filth spread through the air like an invisible plague. It was then that I saw her. She stood out in the crowd, not for beauty, but for her eerie calmness. Her eyes showed no panic, only a cold resignation, a truly terrifying and profound sense of peace. In her arms, a small bundle of worn-out rags was moving, a fragile and nearly unnoticeable sign of life. It was a child, a newborn at the epicenter of the end of the world, an absurdity, a true heresy. For a moment, all the noise around me just disappeared. Only she, the child, and my silence existed. Something inside of me, something I had long thought was dead and buried, stirred restlessly within. At that moment, I didn't know it yet, but my destiny was sealed by those incredibly calm eyes. The selection began. The usual choreographed brutality, the separation of the wheat from the chaff. Right, left, life, death. Decisions made with a simple nod of the head, with utter indifference. A guard approached her, his hand outstretched, his thick fingers ready to snatch and to tear away. She did not resist, did not scream, did not beg for her life. She just held the baby close to her. Her eyes met mine over the soldier's shoulder, and it was right there that everything happened. There were no words, there was no sound, just a mute plea, a silent transfer of responsibility. She was entrusting me with the only thing she had left in the world, her very last spark of hope. I saw the entire story in her gaze, the birth, the love, the escape, and the acceptance of her end. And I, a coward who always hid behind paperwork, found that I could not look away from her face. I was caught in the trap of her silent courage, chained by a request that was never truly made. The guard pulled the child away with force. The bundle of rags fell, revealing a tiny, pale face. And then came the sound, a sharp, thin cry that cut through the heavy air like a shard of glass. That was not a normal baby's cry. It was the sound of innocence itself being brutally torn apart. The crowd fell silent. The guards hesitated. For a second, the universe stopped just to listen. The mother was pushed into the line on the left, the line from which no one ever returned alive. She did not look back. She walked with a dignity that did not belong in that filthy, horrid place. The baby was left on the ground, crying, a pulsating spot of life in the platform's frozen mud. No one moved. The cry echoed in my ears, piercing through layers of indifference and deep fear. I felt my heart hammer against my ribs, a mismatched beat, a frantic drum of utter panic. That sound was the spark that set my soul ablaze, the catalyst for my ruin and my salvation. With a swift motion, I picked the child up from the ground before a boot could crush her by chance. "It's dead," I told the officer, my voice hoarse, surprised by my own incredible audacity. He gave me a disdainful look, his face contorted with impatience, and just made a dismissive gesture. I took the small body to the records room, my heart pounding in my throat like a trapped prisoner. My hand trembled so much that the pen almost fell. The inkwell looked like a deep pit of darkness. On her file, next to the name her mother had whispered to me, I wrote the single word "deceased." I stamped the document with unnecessary force, the sound echoing in the room like a loud gunshot. An entire life erased with a single word, a lie that would cost me my own peace of mind. I hid the living girl inside an empty supply box, praying that she would not make another sound. That night, I left the camp not as a soldier, but as a thief who had stolen a single breath of life. The journey to the countryside was a complete blur of paranoia. Every headlight was a threat. The girl, wrapped in my greatcoat, slept a fragile sleep, oblivious to the dangers surrounding us. The smell of milk and innocence mixed with the scent of damp wool and my own cold, nervous sweat. I could feel everyone's eyes on me at every stop, with every single face that crossed my path. Guilt was a physical weight, an anchor that was pulling me down into the depths of a sea of fear. I had to get to Helga's farm before dawn. She was my one and only, very remote, glimmer of hope. A widow who owed my late father a favor, a blood debt that was sealed many years before this. But could old favors still mean something in this new world of betrayal and pure survival? The car's engine seemed to scream my treason into the silent, star-filled darkness of the night. Each kilometer driven was a step away from hell and a step into a new and different kind of prison. I found Helga behind her house, feeding the chickens in the very first light of the morning. Her face was a mask of wrinkles and distrust. Her eyes were small and incredibly shrewd. I showed her what was hidden inside my coat. She showed no surprise, not even a flicker of pity. She just looked at the child, then at me, and sighed, a weary sound from deep within her soul. "You know what they do to those who hide people like her?" she asked, her voice like dry gravel. I didn't answer her. The silence was the only honest answer that I could offer her at that moment. She led me to the barn, to a small room hidden behind a false wall made of hay and old wood. "She can stay, but if they find her, you were never here," she said, sealing our dark pact. There was no handshake, no promises were made, just a grim understanding between two souls. That night, I slept on the barn floor, listening to the baby's breath and the sound of my fear. The years passed like a long, feverish dream. Anya, the name I gave her, grew up in the barn. She was a child of the shadows. Her laughter was a secret. Her footsteps were always very light. Helga taught her how to read using an old Bible and how to write in the dust on the wooden floor. I visited her once a month, bringing supplies and the constant, heavy weight of my own lies. She called me Uncle, a sad man who appeared with the night and vanished with the morning sun. Her eyes, the same eyes as her mother, questioned me without words, with a purity that hurt me. Why couldn't she play outside? Why was the world just that one dusty room and nothing else? I would make up stories about an illness, about how the air outside was poisonous just for her. Every lie was another brick in the wall that I was building around my very own guarded heart. Watching her grow up was a mixture of joy and agony, a miracle poisoned by guilt and by fear. The war ended. The world celebrated, but for me, peace never came. Only the crushing silence. Helga died of old age, and Anya, now a teenager, was sent away to a distant, quiet convent. With the false papers I created, she became an orphan, an anonymous victim of a time long lost. I lost contact with her, as was the plan. It was the only way to guarantee her absolute safety. I grew old. The ghosts from the train platform became my only and truly faithful companions. The memories, once sharp, began to fragment, to mix with vivid and truly horrid nightmares. The smell of ash would return on the coldest nights, slowly suffocating me in my own bedsheets. I ended up here, in this asylum, a place for the forgotten, for the wreckage of a dark time. My body was failing, but the image of that woman and the cry of her baby never once left me. I awaited death as a liberation, the end of a long penance that I had imposed upon myself. The metal box was hidden under a loose floorboard in the convent that I once called my home. Sister Margaret gave me the key on her deathbed, with a plea for forgiveness on her lips. Inside, yellowed papers, a birth certificate with another woman's name listed there as my mother, and a death certificate, mine, dated the very same day as my birth, signed by a lone soldier. My world, built on the logic of science and of hard facts, simply disintegrated right there. I was not Anya Richter, the orphan. I was a lie, a ghost living a life that had been borrowed. The soldier's name was there, legible, despite the ink that had been faded by the passing time. Klaus Wagner. I spent sleepless nights poring over archives, military records, and lists of the missing. Paranoia took root in me. Who was I? Why would anyone go to all the trouble just to save me? The search for Klaus Wagner became an obsession, the only possible way for me to find myself. The trail was cold, a ghost in dusty records that almost no one ever bothered to consult anymore. Many Klaus Wagners died in the war, others vanished, some were tried for their terrible crimes. But my Klaus was different. There was a note in his file, discharged for instability. After months of searching, I found his name in an unlikely place, a state asylum's registry. Sankt Dimphna Asylum for Veterans and the Indigent, a name that sounded just like a death sentence. The place was hundreds of kilometers away, in a forgotten region where all the main roads died. I called him. The head nurse was curt. Yes, he was there. In a terminal state, she told me. He doesn't receive any visitors. He hasn't spoken to anyone in years, she said with coldness. My heart froze. I was so close, but time, my greatest enemy, was quickly running out for me. I bought a train ticket, feeling the bitter, crushing irony of fate in every move I made. The train ride was a journey into myself, a deep dive into the darkness of my unknown past. The landscape outside was changing from vibrant cities to gray villages and desolate, dead fields. The wheels on the tracks made a hypnotic sound, a rhythm that seemed to whisper old secrets. I clutched the documents in my bag as if they were a charm or a truly terrible, damning curse. What would I say to him? Thank you for saving me? Or, why did you destroy my true identity? Fear and gratitude waged a silent war inside my chest, leaving me completely out of my breath. I imagined his face in 1,000 different ways. A monster, a saint, a completely broken man. The truth was a deep abyss, and I was on the edge, about to jump without knowing what was below. When I stepped out at the deserted station, I felt a chill that came not from the wind, but from within. The asylum stood on a hill, a dark silhouette against the sky that was the color of dull lead. The asylum smell was a nauseating mix of boiled cabbage, strong disinfectant, and despair. Long, silent hallways with worn linoleum floors echoed with my every hesitant, soft footstep. The residents, sitting in wheelchairs, stared at me with empty eyes, absent from the world. They were like wax statues of their past lives, forgotten by everyone, including themselves. The nurse guided me without a word, her keys dangling from her belt like those of a jailer. Every door we passed seemed like a portal to a new circle of profound suffering and loneliness. The air grew heavier with each step, harder to breathe, as if the pain itself was palpable. The walls, painted a yellowish white, seemed to have absorbed decades of unheard quiet laments. Finally, we stopped before a door at the end of the hall, with the number 3 be painted on it. "This is it," she said. "Don't expect much." And then she left me all alone with my ghosts. I opened the door slowly. The room was small, Spartan, with a single, high barred window. A man was lying in the bed, so thin and frail he barely made a lump under the thin white sheet. His breathing was a low wheeze, the only sound in the oppressive silence of that little room. His face was a web of deep wrinkles, his skin thin and almost translucent over his sharp bones. He looked like a map of a war-torn land, a territory of complete and utter desolation. I sat in a chair beside the bed, my heart beating uncontrollably in a state of pure panic. I stayed there, in silence, for a time I could not measure. Minutes? Hours? An eternity? It was him, the man who had signed my death so that I could live. My creator and my ghost. He didn't move, lost in sleep or a coma, traveling through landscapes I would never see. I didn't know what to do, what to say. How do you thank someone for such a heavy burden? The afternoon sun streamed through the window, a single dusty shaft of light cutting the room. The light touched his face. His eyelids, thin as tissue paper, fluttered and then they opened. His eyes were a faded blue, clouded by cataracts and by the weight of time and endless pain. They roamed the room, unfocused, until they landed on me. And then something changed in them. A spark, a flash of lucidity in the fog of senility and the morphine that was killing him. I saw confusion, then doubt, and then the absolute shock of recognition, a wave of disbelief. His lips moved, but no sound came out, just a puff of air, a truly colossal, painful effort. His eyes filled with tears, which rolled slowly down his hollowed, wrinkled, and pale cheeks. He didn't see a renowned scientist. He saw the baby from the platform, the girl from the barn. In that one single gaze, 50 years of silence, fear, and loneliness simply crumbled away. He tried to sit up, but the effort was far too great for his fragile and very tired old body. A raspy sound, a whisper that was more air than voice, escaped from his chapped, broken lips. I leaned closer, the smell of sickness and old age filling my nostrils as I drew nearer to him. "Anya," he said, "just my name, a name that no one else in the entire world ever uttered." That sound, so faint, carried the weight of a confession, a testament, and an absolution. He remembered. In the midst of his own darkness, he had kept a single light burning for me. I took his hand. It was cold and bony, like the branch of a dead tree in the middle of winter. He squeezed my fingers with a surprising strength, a final spark of life and his own will. "Your eyes," he whispered again. "They are her eyes. They are your own mother's very eyes." And then I knew he hadn't saved me out of pity. He had saved me because of a distant memory. He said nothing more. We just stayed there, holding hands as the afternoon died on the outside. We didn't need any words. The silence between us was filled with everything that needed to be said. I felt the entire story in that touch. The risk, the fear, the sacrifice, his loneliness. He was not a hero. He was a terrified man who committed one single act of madness and humanity. An act that both saved him and condemned him at the same time, chaining him forever to that moment. I saw peace finally settle on his face, smoothing the wrinkles of life filled with torment. It was as if my presence there, the proof that his act had not been in vain, had set him free. He was passing the baton to me, handing over the weight and the mystery of my own troubled life. As night fell, his hand relaxed in mine. His breathing stopped. He was finally gone from here. I stood in the dark, holding the hand of a stranger who was the closest person I had ever had. The nurse handed me a small metal box with his belongings. There was almost nothing inside. A broken watch, a few old coins, a comb. The anonymous wreckage of a forgotten, lonely life. But at the bottom, under a bundle of unsent letters, I found a single, old, faded photograph. It was a young woman with a serious and intelligent gaze. My eyes, my chin, it was my mother. I turned the photo over. There was hasty handwriting on the back, almost illegible, done in pencil. It was not Klaus's handwriting. It was a short message, a note that made absolutely no sense. The bird sings at midnight. Liesel knows the location. Trust only in Klaus Wagner. My heart stopped. This was not a memento. It was a coded message, a part of an escape plan. Klaus didn't just save me. He was following an order. He was a part of something much bigger. The mystery, which I thought I had solved, was only just beginning to show its dark, ugly face. The truth hit me like a freight train. My mother was not just another one of the anonymous victims. That calm, resigned look she had on the platform was not one of acceptance, but of sacrifice. She was in the resistance. Liesel, a name that opened up secret files I didn't know existed. The baby's cry, my cry, was not an accident. It was the signal. It was the main diversion. Klaus didn't save a child. He saved a package. In the rags that wrapped me, a small microfilm. A document with the identities of dozens of double agents inside of the German High Command. My life was the price for the safety of many. A living bait to protect a very vital secret. He raised me in secret not just to protect me, but to protect the information that I was. Now here I am, with a truth that is far too great to carry. A legacy of blood and secrets. Was the sin of war that he saved me? Or was it my mother, who used me as her final weapon?